Okay, so I know that we ended the last video with this slide. I just wanted to make sure everybody was okay with the difference between the two because we didn't have a chance to go over the second part. All right, so just like I said, make sure you read the directions carefully. Construct and interpret a 95% confidence interval is different than. See how it says you will use a 95% confidence interval to test to see if the company should do a more thorough investigation of this company. This right here is a significance test. This is literally just creating a confidence interval and interpreting this way. For this second one, you are literally going to follow the exact same set of 7 directions that you did for your significance test. The only difference is instead of finding the z-score, and you're just going to use a confidence interval in that portion. So you're not going to interpret the confidence interval in the sense that you're explaining what the confidence interval means. You're using the confidence interval to state we fail to reject or reject the null, there's sufficient or insufficient evidence, and using that same conclusion. And then the only difference will be instead of relating p to the alpha value, you will say because the true proportion lies in the interval, we fail to reject the null, does not lie in the interval, we do reject the null. So just be careful right here with the 2 sets of directions. Oftentimes this first set of directions, students will do a full significance test. They'll do a null and alternative and all that other good stuff. So just be careful with that. You don't have to do that for this first section. Okay, so there are instructions on Blackboard on how to do a 1 proportion z-test and confidence interval on the calculator. Please take a minute and take a look at those video instructions in Blackboard, because remember on the multiple choice section of the AP exam and your multiple choice sections for the course, there will be a lot of the mechanics will be the same. The mechanics let me start over again. A lot of the multiple choice questions, you don't have to show your mechanics for the works for any of them. So learn how to use your graphing calculator so that you're much quicker on the multiple choice questions. However, also for the free response, I would absolutely use your calculator to get the answers, but just use it as a check to make sure that your answers are correct. But I would have your calculator do the calculations for you in the 1 proportion z-test and confidence interval portion. Then you know you're not doing anything incorrectly. Just make sure that you have your correct numbers plugged into the formula. But if you do that, that's totally fine. Just make sure that you show your work, because if you don't on the AP exam and on your tests and your homework, if you just give a calculator answer for the do step, you won't receive credit. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about with the calculator. I don't just mean like plugging the numbers in. So in order to do 1 proportion z-test, you go to Stat button, go over to Test. Notice how it's sort of the same way. That's why it's important to name your test, because it's also helpful for your calculator. 1 proportion z-test. So you're going to go down to that. And then notice how it says this right here, this is your population proportion. This X and N, that is your sample. And then this is your total sample size. Okay, so this is the proportion of basically successes, and then this is your sample size. You choose what you want the alternative to be, and then you're going to hit calculate. Now, right here, it's really important to make sure that these are both whole numbers, because when you take a sample, you're not going to end up with 68.2 people that answered a certain way. So just make sure that both of these are whole numbers. If not, you'll get an error. Hit calculate, and then it'll take you to this part right here. Notice how it gives you the your population proportion, and then what your alternative hypothesis was, your z-score. This p right here is your p-value. P hat is your sample proportion, and your n value. So there's sort of your answer to your question all right there. You just have to know the 7 steps to writing out your answer. All right, so how about for a 1 proportion confidence interval? Like I said, just know how to plug the numbers into the confidence interval, and then use your calculator to get the actual confidence interval. So same thing, go to Stat, go over to Test, 1 proportion z interval here. All right, so that's why it's important to know that name of the test. Notice right here, we're giving the X, the N. So this was what, like 68 out of 300. What's the confidence level, and hit calculate. So right here, if you're just sort of given like you want to make sure that this is a full size. You can't just be full number, whole number. You can't be like 68.2 or it won't do it correctly. Okay, so then here, notice how it gives you your confidence interval, gives you your p hat and your n value. All right, if you have any questions on this section, let me know. Next up is population means.